Joe Segal knew a little something about being self-made. He was a living, breathing example of someone who could make something out of nothing. Before we get to all of his successes, we have to go back to the 1930s where it all began, Vegreville, Alberta.
We didn't have a refrigerator when I grew up. We had an ice shed. And so you'd cut chunks of ice out of the river and you'd store them in sawdust. You'd have a storage place for the ice. And I was 6 years old and I burnt the place down. I was trying to smoke or play with matches anyway. So, but you always had, we were housed across the street from the market. And so every morning you would see these horses and buggies come in to do their shopping in Vegreville. And I think there were about 10 or 12 Jewish families, of which I was one. And that was growing up, and you remembered it because you knew everybody, and it was hello, and how are you? And today, it's a different story. In the city of Vancouver, this is a wonderful city, but most people are looking at the ground, not looking at other people.
Sadly, your father passed away when you were just 14?
Yes.
That must have been tough.
Well, for me, I was with him when he dropped dead. Heart attack. But if it was today, he'd be alive because medicine is different today. And that's why it's important that we support and appreciate everything that is taking place in medicine.
You started out at the age of 15 all on your own. You just went off, you didn't have a lot of money, and how did you make a living at that point?
It was very simple. When my father died, my mother was a widow, and I wanted to be independent. And so if I said to her, give me a dime, I want to go and have a hamburger with the boys, I had to fight for the dime because she was a widow and I had siblings and I could understand how she felt. So I said to her, I think I'm going to quit school and I'm going to go to work. And so I quit school, I went to work. My first job was $5 a week. And I can remember sitting in a lawyer's office, and the lawyer said there were 4 of us, all the same age. And the lawyer said, I'm hiring 4 of you for this company. But he said in a year there will only be 1 left. So that was the risk. I was the one that was left, and I was earning $5 a week. And in a little while I was earning $25 a week, but the war was on. The war started in 1939, this was in the 40s. And I said, I'm going to go to work on the Alaska Highway because they were paying $100 and $110 a week.
So Joe went to work on the building of the Alaska Highway, making what was considered a minor fortune, $3,000. With that bounty, Segal took a train to Calgary with a smile on his face to visit a girl, but he got a little sidetracked.
And I went to Calgary to see this girl. I never did get to see her. I got into a poker game, and that was all night. And then when the taxi office started working the day shift, I moved to my hotel with the same poker game. When it was finished, I couldn't pay the hotel. So I phoned my mother.
You lost all your money?
I lost every dime I had. I couldn't pay the hotel bill, and I phoned her and I said, will you lend me the money and I'll go back to work and so on. And she said to me, you made the bed, you lie in it.
Remember, he was still wet behind the ears. He'd lost virtually every penny. It was a wake-up call, a rude one.
But then I said, this is no good. There's a war on, and I'm not going to plead for anything. I'm going to be independent. So I went down and I tried to join the Navy. They said, sure, but it'll take about a month. I said, I haven't got a month. Well, they said, go down and go to Miwata Barracks and join the army.
Joe packed up and shipped out to fight in the war as a member of the Calgary Highlanders, which saw action in Belgium, Holland, and Germany. How did the war change you personally?
Personally, it gave you, I was only 18, and so you had to understand that when you're in that, when you have supporting friends with you, if you make a mistake, it could get them. If they make a mistake, it could get you. And you had to understand why you were there. And you didn't have any choice. You did what you have to do. And there was no running away from anything. You had an order, and it said advance until you encounter enemy fire. So what does that mean? It means you keep going till you're shot at. And then you know where to shoot back.
And Segal says it was faith in God that saw him through.
We push off 9 platoon, 8 platoon, then 7 platoon. We get caught in a crossfire. And there's a barbed wire in front of the farmhouse. And the farmhouse is inhabited by the German army. And so I went under this wire, and you wear a steel helmet, and my helmet got caught. And that means I'm a target. And a bullet went so close that I could feel it burn. That's how close it was. And I said, God, get me the hell out of here. That was my first experience with God.
Your first prayer.
And he got me out of there.
After the war, Segal came to Vancouver where he met his wife, Rosalie. After the war, you ended up in Vancouver. Did you meet Rosalie here?
I met her here, but I never knew her before. But I did see her. I went with this cousin of mine to greet Rosalie, who was coming back from Vancouver Island, and she came off the ferry. And I said to myself, that's the girl of my dreams. I'm going to marry her. But I had trouble. Her mother didn't want me. Her father didn't want me. They wanted a doctor or a lawyer or an accountant, somebody with a profession to make a living. And that, you know, everything that happens in life provides some determination. And I had determination. I'm going to marry her. So after 2 years I did, but she was only 17. She was 15. I thought she was 21. She looked older.
So you married her. You had no assets, basically.
I had nothing.
So how did you
I had
start?
$1,500 that you had for overseas army pay, and you didn't use it because you didn't need it when the war was on. So my $1,500 was intact, and I had her, and I wanted a date. And I asked her out on a date. She said yes. I don't know why, but she did.
She looked at you and she said, that's the guy I'm going to be with for the rest of my life.
Well, I got to tell you, 73 years later, I still wonder why.
It's an inauspicious start, which by now you know wasn't unusual for Joe. He quickly set to work building a career.
And what I did was I sold little coffee shops. At that time, there were lots of little grocery stores and coffee shops. So if a guy wanted to sell his coffee shop or grocery store, I sold it.
Ever the entrepreneur, Joe identified opportunities others didn't just miss, they couldn't even see them.
So I got into the war surplus business. The first deal was 2,000 gallons of olive drab in 5-gallon containers, 2,000 gallons of olive drab paint. Now, nobody's going to paint their house camouflage paint.
No.
So what am I going to do with 2,000 gallons of paint that costs 25 cents a gallon? That's $500. I rented a green panel Ford truck, and I loaded the Ford truck with the 5-gallon cans, and I'd go to Chilliwack one day, and I'd sell every farm that had a barn that looked like it needed painting. I would sell them camouflage paint. It was good paint, and it was $2 a gallon. And then the next day I go to Ladner. So to make a long story short, that was a good margin.
He was making good money, but like all growing businesses, he needed access to cash, especially if he wanted to seize bigger opportunities. In other words, he needed to work with a bank.
I said to the manager, I'd like to give you my account. I want to move here, and I want to borrow $5,000. He said, who are you? Even if you bring your account here, it doesn't mean I'm going to lend you $5,000. What's it for? So I told him what it was for. He said, well, that makes sense.
With cash in hand, Joe bought the guts of a Canadian naval ship for pennies on the dollar.
And the reason I got it was because nobody else wanted it, because nobody else knew what it was. But when I walked through, I saw a little scratch out of the paint, and that little scratch had a little reflection in it. And it turned out that all this stuff, everything naval, is brass. And brass at that time was worth a fortune. So I bought this stuff for $7,000, and I picked up the phone to a scrap dealer, and I said, would you like to come and look at this stuff, and so on. And I sold it to the scrap dealer. And I made a big profit overnight. But nobody else wanted this stuff, so I got it.
That lucky bank employee who gave you that first $5,000 just on trust, I'm sure has made millions from doing business with you.
He had a vision, you see. We can talk about a banker. There used to be an old saying, there's a customer's banker and a banker's banker. A customer's banker has the imagination and the understanding of where the customer is coming from. The banker's banker only goes by the rules, and he doesn't deviate from the rules. So that's the difference in a banker. Now the same $5,000 loan from this banker, and my account went to the Bank of Montreal. That grew to the point of where I borrowed $50 million, and I bought Zellers.
So how did you make that buy?
That was motivation. So we're in the courtroom, and the judge says, okay, what's your bid? I said, 30 million. What's your bid? They said 32 million. And then we went on like this to 34, 36, 38, and then I said to myself, I'm going to run out of money. So I said to the judge, I'm here to buy the company, and I'm prepared to write the check. Now, are they prepared to do the same thing? So the judge turned to them and he said, are you prepared to write a check? Well, they said, no, we can't. We have to have the approval of the chairman, and he's out hunting now.
Well, at least he wasn't sloshed.
So anyway, the judge said to me, will you give us a week for them to get their permission? I said, no, I'm here to buy the company. I'll write the check. He said, will you leave us till tomorrow morning? I said yes. So we reconvened at 10 o'clock the next morning. Oh, I'm not boring you. We reconvened at 10 o'clock the next morning, and the judge said to them, "Can you write the check?" They said, "No, we can't." He turned to me and he said, "I'll give you the company, you write your check, and I hope I never see you in this courtroom again."
And you got Zellers.
That's how I got Zellers.
So Zellers was not doing well.
They were losing money.
How do you turn around a company?
I lifted the saran wrap and I let the company breathe. And they were trying to replicate everything that their parent was doing. And it was all wrong. If the president walked by, everybody stood to attention. That was no good. You had to have an open door. Here I am, I arrive on the scene from Los Angeles, and I'm taking over this company. And I said, "You know, I want you to get me an office, not a big office, a little office. I need a desk, I need a filing cabinet, I need 2 chairs, and I need a secretary."
He rolled up his sleeves and went to work. Over the next few years, he was able to improve sales at some of those stores 5-fold. And then you turned your sights on the Bay.
I got on a plane, I went to Toronto, went up to see Don McGivern, and I said, "Don, I'm going to take a shot at your company. I'm going to try to buy it." He said, "How much? What are you going to pay?" I said, "I don't know." I was serious. I said, "Don, you can believe me, I've got the money." He said, "I believe you." How did I have the money? I had a line of credit. I had a deal with the Bank of Montreal to lend me $500 million.
That 5,000 went up to 500 million. With $500 million to spend to purchase the Bay, he had everything in place, except for one very important item, his wife Rosalie's approval. She had been by his side virtually every step of his career thus far. But...
So I had the money. And then I came home and I told my wife what I was going to do. And she said, "Why are you doing it? Do you need the money?" I said, "No, I don't need the money. I'm in good shape." Well, she said, "Then why are you doing it?" And she commuted with me when I bought Zellers for 3 years back and forth till I turned it around. So she said, "I'm not commuting to Toronto. You want to do it, you're on your own." So I've never been on my own. And I said, "I don't want to try it." So I went back to the Bay and I said to him, "I think you should really buy us instead of we buying you."
You've always been known as a philanthropist. You give, you donate, you help. Why?
Why? There's an old golden rule: do unto others as you would have them do unto you. So you do what you can do.
You have said that a millionaire can give away $10,000 and he won't even miss it.
No.
But it's the woman at the door that helps some little kid who needs something small.
Absolutely, absolutely, you know. But most people that give money today give it because they either have an obligation in the community or because they want to do it and they want to help.
There are, of course, other ways of giving to a community besides financial, and you've done it with your time, and especially your relationship with Simon Fraser University. It's a very tight relationship. You were on the board for 12 years, chancellor for 6. I mean, that was a great honor.
But they asked me to join the board, and I said no. Then the president came, And he said, we need you. And I said, why do you need me? He said, because we need a different perspective.
The board knew Joe would bring a different perspective. In particular, he shone light on the fact that SFU was out of sight, out of mind.
The one thing wrong with SFU is they have no presence downtown. And the action is downtown. The education is on the hill, but the action is downtown. And I made a deal with Sears. And I said to them, I'll take the store, but I'm not paying you for it. You're going to pay me to take it. And that's what happened. And they gave me, not me, the university, $15 million, which went into an endowment fund, which paid all of the rent for 35 years.
In talking about life trajectories, you have said life is a little bit like an airplane flight.
It is precisely like an aircraft flight. When you take off, you're on that runway, and you're young, and you're on the runway, you're a plane, and then you ascend. Well, that's what happens in life too. When you're young, then you get a little older, you get into business or whatever, you ascend. And then you cruise. You reach the vice president stage or the president stage, now you're cruising. And then you descend, because sooner or later an aircraft has to come back to Earth. Sooner or later a person has to come back to Earth. And so the older you get, you start descending when you're 60 or 5 or 70.
Or 100, you
or
can start.
100 if you want. You know, I don't think I'm descending yet. I got a lot of things to do.
Exactly.
And I'm trying to do them. But I'm only 96. When I get to be 100, I'll have to start to think.
For Joe, it's easy to believe he'd be thinking about the next deal he's going to make, and the one after that, on into the future. Sadly, we lost him in May of 2022. Joe Segal, a BC legend.